This is hypnotic authenticity. This is a space for inner clarity, where hypnosis meets self-inquiry, where the stories that you carry can become gentle invitations for change. We're going to explore identity, emotional harmony, and authentic living through subtle, mindful approaches and a really, really good sprinkling of hypnosis. So take a slow, deep breath and let's begin. I'm going to talk today about the concept of personal boundaries, because this is absolutely crucial, in actual fact, for understanding yourself. So I guess it's going to relate most to you if you would kind of like to be able to access your pillar of strength, if you'd like to be able to find inside of you a sense of peace, if you'd like to place your energy in things which are fruitful, not futile, if you'd maybe benefit from a better sense of your own self-assuredness, your own self-confidence, your own solidity, your own sense of what are non-negotiables, what are absolutely core values. So effectively getting a rigorous, aligned, congruent sense of who you are. That's quite a lot, isn't it, for boundaries? But it feels right. It feels valid. So let me start by talking about what boundaries are. So a boundary is a wall, okay? Typically, a boundary is an edge of something, a perimeter. So when we're talking about personal boundaries, I kind of have a sense of a perimeter to myself. Now, the first time I came across this was with this book, I think it was Stephen Covey that wrote it, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he's talking about boundaries from, I'm not even sure he actually mentions the word boundaries, but he's talking about your sphere of influence. So we have things that are within our control. And then we have things that we wish we had control over, that we have a degree of control over, a degree of influence over, let's say. And then there are certain things that we have absolutely no control over whatsoever that are just going on in the world. And this is a very stoical approach to life, in actual fact, to focus on the things that you can make a difference about and to forget about the things which are going to go on no matter whether you ruminate and procrastinate or chew on or not, because they're subject to well, things which are totally outside of your extent. So for me, boundaries goes a little bit further than that, and it talks about the things that are important to you. So in the core of yourself, deeply within your personal boundary, however you want to sense or imagine that boundary to be, right at the core are the things that are very, very important to you that you have a lot of control over. You might consider that to be your feelings, your thoughts, I don't know, maybe you would think your thoughts are not in your control. I don't know. Personally, my inner critic goes there. My actions, my motivations, my goals, my felt sense is there. And then as you go out, as you approach the perimeter of yourself, however you want to imagine that or feel it, are the things which are still important to you, but that you have ever decreasing amounts of control over until you reach the point of that boundary where the kind of friction is, where beyond the boundary you don't have control, or you have almost no control. And so the things that are inside of your control, as I say, your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, your goals, the things outside of your boundary, or maybe what other people think and say and do, politics, the way the world turns, the way that culture chooses to value certain things over other things, that kind of idea. And the reason I think this is so important is because when you don't have a concept of your personal boundaries, everything's noisy. There's not too much prioritizing going on. There's just sort of an overwhelm of stuff. When you have a sense of your boundary, where you have a sense of where you have personal agency and where you don't, well, then you can choose to direct your attention more appropriately. Because the world's going to do what the world does, right? But you have a choice as to whether or not you react on autopilot to that you bend in the wind, or to instead take a step back, compose yourself, and respond. Take responsibility. The words are linked. They have the same root. You choose your response and you take responsibility for your response. So personally, I kind of have a felt sense for my boundary. There is a sort of an energy field around me, and I know that sounds utterly woo-woo, but this is just in my head, right? It doesn't have to be real, but I like to have hooks that I can kind of hang on. I can visualize. I can bring structure to my stories, and so I imagine this kind of ball of energy that surrounds me, and it doesn't touch my skin. It's outside my skin, and it's just a concept. But inside that, I feel safe. I feel that there are the things that I choose to pay attention to and that have a intrinsic value to them and that I have agency over. And outside of my boundaries are things that I care about, but that I just don't have any control over. Maybe what I'll do, let me just give you a sort of a brief eyes closed experience so that you can start to get a felt sense of this rather than just using your kind of analytical or critical mind to chew on it. So obviously only if it's safe and appropriate to do so, so not whilst you're driving or operating machinery. Maybe if you want, just find yourself a quiet place where you can engage with the process without disturbing other people and without them disturbing you. And then what I'd suggest, just close your eyes. Maybe focus on your skin. Focus on the perimeter of your body. Maybe focus on your hands. Your hands are probably exposed to the air. And maybe you can notice the temperature of the air surrounding your hands. And maybe there's a space between your hands and you can notice the temperature of the air and the space between your hands. And as you're doing so, you can become aware of the support of the chair or the bed or the piece of furniture that you're sat upon. Maybe you can notice the texture of the clothing that you're wearing. And the air that you breathe in, and the temperature of the air that you breathe in. And the rise and fall of your chest. And the temperature of the air as you breathe out. And maybe you can become aware of the beating of your heart, pulse in your wrist. And as you listen to my voice, focus on my words, you can begin to appreciate that your body is already settled down, more still, quieter mind, more at ease. And as you're there, I wonder if you can get a sense of your personal boundary. And it's okay if you can't get a sense of your personal boundary. You can imagine it. But inside that boundary are all the things that you have a choice over, the things that you can act upon, the things that you have a sense of agency about. And all the things outside of that boundary are the things that you have very little or no ability to influence. And maybe you can even feel the friction at the border where you have a little bit of influence. And perhaps that boundary is like a glowing ball of energy, like an orb. Maybe there are certain flickers of light, or maybe it's a felt sense. But with every breath that you inhale, imagine that boundary becoming stronger. And so inside of that boundary, you feel increasingly safe, more robust, more stable, more solid, more strong. Because inside that boundary, you have all the options, all the choices, all the power. And as you sit and observe how it feels and notice what you're noticing, perhaps you can start to get a sense that your boundary is porous. It's possible to move things in and out. Maybe you want to imagine them rolling in and out, or maybe it's just almost like your skin, and there can be an exchange of gases and liquids. But however it feels to you as you're noticing what you're noticing, in your felt sense, in your experience now, I want you to pay attention to everything which is inside of your boundary. Your thoughts, your feelings, your choices, your actions, your goals, your values, your motivations, your wishes, your needs. And perhaps whilst you're there, you might notice certain things that are inside of your boundary that don't really belong there, that actually are better outside of your boundary, that are just not serving you. Maybe things that are important to you and that you've been expending energy upon, but that just are out of your control. And so you will not, by ploughing more investment into it, influence the outcome? And if so, maybe you can imagine rolling those things outside your boundary. Maybe certain individuals, maybe the way people act or say or feel or think. Roll them out of your boundary. And perhaps when you pay attention to what's on the outside of your boundary, you might notice some things that really should be on the inside of your boundary. And that you're kind of giving away your agency, your personal power to something outside of you, which you're permitting to influence you, to drag you in their direction. And if so, you can take note of that. You can thank yourself for having observed it. And you can bring it inside your boundary. And so with every breath that you inhale, you can imagine this boundary becoming stronger, more powerful. Maybe the light gets brighter, or it changes, or it gets thicker or stronger or taller. And within that boundary feels like you. Feels safe. You feel calm. More at ease. Solid. With every breath, that boundary becoming stronger. Glowing, perhaps. Feeling good. And just bring a sense of curiosity and wonder. And perhaps as you do, you can notice other things that really should be on the other side of your boundary. And if so, you can just imagine bringing them in or rolling them out. And every time that you do, it can feel more settled, more at ease, more like you. Until inside your boundary is everything that feels strong and valid. And there's nothing inside there that doesn't belong there. Anybody else's opinion, anybody else's demands, anything that no longer serves you well, you can move outside of your boundary where it belongs. And so other people can be what they are, and you're not exerting any ability or any investment in changing them, because you have that perfect switch and you can feel secure inside. All those new resources, that new learning, breathing them in inside your boundary and letting them out. Breathing them in, strengthening that boundary. And letting them out. And as you notice, maybe you can ask yourself, does this belong inside my boundary? Does this belong outside? Does this serve me? Or does this not? And when you've moved everything that you need to move, You can just sink into that focus on your breathing, rest, settled, calm, perhaps even sense of gratitude, curiosity, happy with your work, knowing that this boundary is always with you, ever strengthening, ever protecting. And you can notice how it feels inside that boundary. Growing sense of courage to enforce your boundary, to notice what you notice, and feel that sense of protection, feeling safe inside yourself. Because you can trust yourself. And whenever you're ready, you can bring yourself back up to a state of full and present awareness. You can open your eyes, you can take in a good deep breath, you can have a stretch. And notice how you feel. Only as quickly as all of that is settled inside of you. Notice how you feel. And if you're like me, you have a sort of a sense of your own flexible solidity, perhaps I could call it. Truth, value, choice. And so the reason that I talk about all of this is because the world is unpredictable. You can gain a sense of your personal ability by understanding your boundaries. But the world's going to do what it does, and we're going to get caught off balance, inevitably, because we can't anticipate everything. So when those shocks come from outside of the system, and it doesn't matter if they're minor shocks or massive shocks, when they occur, you can notice them. And if you have an ever-present sense, a felt sense of that boundary, well, you can kind of instantly know. Where does that fit? Inside or outside my boundary? Do I have any control over this whatsoever? Is this worth me investing all of my energy upon? Or is this so far outside of my control that I can worry about it if I choose to do so, but it's going to do what it's going to do? So it helps you to lighten up to a certain extent, to acquiesce to the things which are outside of your control so that you can better focus your energy on the things that are inside of your control. It can give you a sense of deeper knowledge, deeper understanding, deeper awareness of your capabilities, perhaps even of what is important, because you're learning about your powerlessness as much as about your power. And you're learning about the methods by which you can prioritize, that you can get things done within the framework and the remit of what you're capable of and what the world is going to do. So I find it an incredibly expansive way of understanding yourself. And being comfortable with your lack of power is as important as trying to build up your sense of self. Because I think your true sense of credibility comes from a sense of ease of your powerlessness as much, if not more, than your knowledge of what it is that you can do. Because then you're not swimming against the tide, you're swimming with your strengths, with your internal harmony. And so you are enhancing yourself rather than batting up against things which are kind of unfair, that you wish you could change. So you get that sense of peace. You know, I said in one of the other videos, I talk about this idea that the only way you can ever feel in control is when you're comfortable in letting go of control, safe in the knowledge that you can regain that control when you choose to do so, but allowing yourself to relax. The point with boundaries is that then you know when you need to be alert and when you don't. So when things occur around you and you get a sense of injustice, for example, you know something's pushing on your boundary. You can be aware of it and you can build it into your story of what you are. And you can consider, should this be inside my boundary? Should this be outside? What do I do? So it gives you a mechanism of ever strengthening your boundary, of being able to maintain that boundary against attack. It's kind of a dramatic word, but can't think of a better one in this particular moment in time. When people are trying to persuade you to do something that maybe you don't want to do or say or think, having that sense of awareness of where you lie inside your boundary and where this challenge, whatever it may be, is, it augments your map. It gives you a better way of responding rather than reacting on autopilot. And for me, that's a fantastic tool. In another podcast, I'll get onto a related issue, which is it's kind of colloquially called cutting cords. So this is where individuals typically, it could be events, kind of feel as though they are attached to you. If you could imagine that you have cords from your front and from your back, and from your front you're attaching your cords to other things, other people that you truly wished that you could influence and draw upon, and in your back other things that where people have attached to you in efforts to influence and persuade you. And another way of considering your personal boundaries is by considering all of that and detaching all of the cords which are unnecessary, that are unhelpful, so that you can be you. And it doesn't mean distancing yourself from the people that are corded, but it means having a more rational, stabilized sense of self, so that your relationship with other people can be far more authentic, it can be far more truthful, more valid, more real, more relatable, because there's no element of influence or manipulation going on in the subtext. And instead, you are authentically being you and equally giving them permission to authentically be them. It's a different way of looking at the same story. But the story is, once I understand where my capacity to act stops, then I can focus on everything inside of that. I can bring my energies where they are most fruitful. and I don't need to worry about the other things. It's a very, very stoical approach. I hope that's of interest. It's something that's worth practicing on, because the more you do it, the more at ease you feel inside your own skin. And I can't really think of much that would be better than that. Plus, it gives you choices. It gives you the ability to observe how much of you is in flux, how much of you is really under your control, and how much is less under your control than you thought. But if you bring a sense of curiosity, of open-minded interest, of the intention that you're going to make some kind of progress, some kind of knowledge, but that there's no right or wrong answer, and you'll just see where you get. It can be a delightful learning experience. Thank you for listening. If it supported you in some way or helped you to question your inner experience, then follow the show. Personally, I would be really grateful if you might also leave a quick rating. It makes a huge difference in terms of discoverability so that other people who might benefit can find the podcast. If you prefer a visual element, check out Authentic Life Hypnosis on YouTube. And if you're looking for deeper work beyond one-way audio yourself, you're very welcome to reach out. Equally, if you have any questions, I'm here to help. Until next time.